Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us this evening for this program in commemoration of Yom HaShoah, Holocaust Remembrance Day. And we're just very, very grateful to all of you for joining. And we're grateful to our extraordinary group of panelists who are joining us this evening. You're going to learn a lot more about the amazing story that's told in this documentary. I had the great pleasure. It was a challenging thing to watch because it is so powerful. But I had the opportunity to watch this film about a year ago as it was making its way through the circuit of festivals, the many festivals that it appeared in, and the many laurels that it was awarded. And it's one of those stories that you just can't believe it's real. And as you see it unfold, you realize it is in fact exactly that. So thank you everybody for being here. I think it's a very fitting way to commemorate this powerful and heavy day in our Jewish calendar. And I just wanted to invoke a little personal privilege and just share that this morning, my cousin, 92 years old, Menashe Davidovich, who's a survivor of Auschwitz and Dachau, died in Ramat HaSharon. And I feel very lucky that I got to know him and hear his story. And when I saw this film a year ago and saw some of the footage that took place in Auschwitz, and then having visited that place myself, so such a powerful way to connect to this day. I'm going to turn things over to my colleague and friend, Rabbi Ron Stern, who's going to introduce our panel and get us started with some questions. Thank you, Rabbi Stern.
Thank you, Rabbi Yoshi. I'm actually going to invite our panelists to go ahead and unmute your video and your sound if you'd like. Oh, there we are. Beautiful. So thank you so much for joining us. I'd like to welcome both our WISE members and those of you who are joining us because you heard about this through various other sources. We're pleased to have you. You're attending one of the many offerings that Stephen Weiss Temple offers to our community through Zoom now. The pandemic has given us the rather strange and unexpected opportunity to reach a much wider audience. And we do appreciate the opportunity and we are grateful to you for joining us. And we also hope that you'll enjoy and learn and be inspired and enlightened and perhaps even a little troubled by this dialogue that we're about to have. Before we do a little bit of housekeeping, first and foremost, we just want to highlight a couple of events coming up at WISE so that you might choose to join us. You can find out more details on our WISE website, wisela.org. On Yom HaZikaron, we'll be having a discussion group about the movie Waltz with Bashir. If you haven't seen it, I recommend watching it. And as always, watch the film in advance so you'll be prepared to engage in the conversation. That's on April 14th. And then on April 22nd, Rabbi Yoshi runs a program called Book of Life, and his guest is Pastor Corey Kennard, discussing a difficult topic, but one that's so important for us to address, which is end-of-life issues and healthcare advocacy. And then finally, on April 28th, and of course, I dare say finally, because our list of offerings goes on well past April. But on April 28th, we have a rather unique experience. We're kicking off our first in our annual series called the Bradley Sonnenberg Wellness Series, supported by our dear friends, Andrea and Glenn Sonnenberg, and memory and honor of their son, Bradley. In this particular inaugural event, we'll have a dialogue with Diane Shader-Smith, who finished her daughter's memoirs and book after her daughter passed away at 25 after a fight with cystic fibrosis. While, of course, there's cause for sorrow when you hear this particular story, there's all cause for inspiration because Mallory lived quite an incredible life. So we invite you to join us for that on April 28th. Then finally, a last bit of housekeeping. This is a webinar. If you do see a chat on your screen, we invite you not to use that chat. Your remarks will not be seen by anybody on the call. However, we do ask you to use the question and answer box. We have a moderator on our call who will be reviewing the questions that you pose and sending them to us so that we can ask you, we can ask your questions and pose your questions to our moderators, to our participants, I should say. So with that, let me introduce our participants. Daniel Brea is the film's producer director. And I guess Daniel will give you credit for even conceiving of putting this film together at all. Daniel is known to Rabbi Yoshi and I quite well. He actually was the producer of our holiday series that we did for our services for our first online. And Daniel gets credit for herding clergy, which is not at all easy, but he managed to get us to rise to our best as we recorded our holiday services for our community. So Daniel, we are grateful to you on so many levels, not just for bringing us this film, but also for being just a contributing member of our congregation.
Thank you so much.
John Daly you recognize John from the film. I think John looks pretty much the same as he did in the film. He's the Jewish ex-neo-Nazi, and we're going to talk more, of course, about that. John, as is mentioned in his bio, and I think it's worth mentioning even now, suffers from PTSD as a result of so many of his life experiences, and as he may share with us during the course of our conversation, is also involved in a struggle with a brain tumor that fortunately has made it possible for him to be with us today, but continues to be a challenge in his life. And then Kevin does not look anything like the character that you saw, the subject of the documentary. His hair is long, his beard is grown in, but trust us, he is that person. He's a former skinhead and neo-Nazi, and as he says it in his own online bio, is on a mission to change his own life and make amends for his past. So gentlemen, we are so grateful that you have agreed to be with us and to share your stories and to talk about a painful topic. Some people would like to leave the past behind and move on, but your willingness to embrace the past and to share your story with so many is a gift to the world, I have to say. So Daniel, thank you, John. And of course, we apologize everybody for the latencies of Zoom. We are coming to you from three different cities in California, Ashkelon, Israel, and the Midwest, Missouri. So we're all over the place. And many of you are tuning in from all over the place as well. So Daniel, really the first question is for you. What about this story compelled you to make it into a movie? Where did that come from?
Well, it came from being John's neighbor. I lived in Ashkelon at the time, the city that John still lives in. And I came home when I was a young adolescent. I was troubled as an adolescent. Putting it very politely too. So there was something intriguing about John, but we didn't really have much of the dialogue. But one day, I came home and my mom was she had a copy of the Jerusalem Post in her hand, and she was looking out of the window and kind of saying, "I think that's the guy. I think that's the guy from this article." And there was a write-up about John's story. It, in fact, was the guy. And not much happened. I think, I was intrigued by it, but I certainly didn't know much about it. And at that age, you're sort of interested in what gangs and things like that. And there was something compelling about it. And he also did a lot of martial arts and was always kind of looking over his shoulder. So just an interesting guy. Long story short, when I was in the service, we had a little more dialogue. Come to find out, John had always wanted to be in a military organization as well. And so we struck up a friendship, started talking more. Years go by. I leave to LA. I become a filmmaker. And I never forgot about this story. It's actually to John's credit, or to Kevin's credit. Kevin reached out to John in a very complex way, finally found him, because John's been in hiding for 20 odd years. He finds John, they connect. John calls me and says something to the extent of, "There's this guy, we used to be in the same gang together. He wants to meet in Eastern Europe. It's a haven for neo-Nazis. I think this might be another setup. Do you want to come along?" We were going to do some sort of a 10-minute expose for the Israeli media, something little. And I said, "You know what? I'm not going to step in and defend you against a gang of Nazis that are coming after you. But
although
I'll
you
film
could
it
do
and
it, your background allows you to do that, correct? You could have defended.
This is why John wanted me to go in the first place. I think I was a bit safer with you there, but I said I'm no match against the gang. So I said, at the very least, I can film it and make you notorious. That turned out not to be the case. Luckily, Kevin had the best intentions at heart. And as you saw in the film, it ended up being a very moving story of two men reflecting on their past. And so none of us could have expected the outcome, but I figured it was worth jumping on the journey. And the story of how this movie came together is a whole other one, maybe for another day. But that's kind of how it started. And yeah.
Wow. Wow. So, John, this is the question that, of course, every Jewish boy has to ask you. And I, being a Jewish boy, it's like, what is it that makes a Jew? I mean, we pledge fraternities. That's our belonging, right? And sometimes we pledge Jewish fraternities. You went another direction. You became a neo-Nazi. How does a Jewish boy become a neo-Nazi?
I started off in a group that was against racism. And in that group, when I first met them, those guys, as I described in the film, one of them had a swastika on his chest with the black and the white hand cracking it in half. And he said, oh no, we're not racist skinheads. But groups, one of the things they try and do is they forcibly recruit other members, be it an anti-racist group will forcibly recruit racist groups, or the opposite, which is what happened to me. I was forcibly recruited into a Nazi group. It wasn't something that I went and said, hey guys, I'd like to sign up for this. I knew every single day that the moment they found out my lineage, that I'd be dead. Every single day.
I wanted to, kind of zoom forward a little bit. We've been talking a little bit about the events that inspired this documentary and everything that sort of led up to that. And when I first saw it, it was, as I said earlier, it was about a year ago or so when Daniel had sent me a screener of it, and I got it, boy, even more than that probably. And now I'm thinking about, the events of January 6th, and I'm looking at those militias and some of those groups that were aligned with white supremacists, neo-Nazi groups. I'm just wondering, especially for you, Kevin, and for you, John, as you witnessed those events on television and read about it, what kinds of things did that stir up in you, given your previous experience and your contact with groups of that type?
Do you want to go first, Kevin, or would you rather I?
By all means.
Zillow Chuvas. All right. For myself, as I watched over here from Israel, it was surreal to see it. But also, I've been out of the United States for about 24 years. So it's like it's literally watching something take place in another country, which is even more surreal. That you're watching what seems like a banana republic take place in front of your eyes of the place that you grew up in. As for the racist groups that were there were also people waving Israeli flags, which is the strangeness of American politics for those of us that don't live in the United States anymore, that you can have all these separate groups working together in the same area. As for the racist groups, yeah, those are the ones they're terrifying what you guys have going on over there right now. More so the accelerations. Those are the ones that just want to see total societal collapse.
As for myself, as I see what's happening in America, it's almost as prescribed. It's distract and divide, and it's just a little bit more open than one would expect.
John, what got you out? I guess one can say what got, maybe we can understand, and perhaps we can, if you'd like to elaborate, feel free about what got you in. But what light went off in your head that said, nah, this is the wrong path. And not only do I need to get out, but I need to put myself into the middle of it all and go visit concentration camps. And the tears you shed in that movie were powerful tears. And I'd love you to talk a little bit about that as well. So what got you out, and how did you get to the place where you were feeling that pain in those concentration camps?
For me or for Kevin?
For Kevin, sorry, for Kevin. Excuse me. Yeah, Kevin.
How did I get out?
Yeah.
I moved halfway across the country and just recreated myself. How did
what
I
precipitated that move? Was it just fortuitous, or what ended the relationship?
I had tried to step away from because I basically became involved with the National Socialist Movement in the United States of America because people came to visit me in the hospital. It made me feel important. But there's a stigma that carries, and when people hear about it, there's word of mouth and things get out of control. So I had tried to walk away from it several times, but it's not as easy as you would think. It took me literally moving across the United States of America.
So getting at the tentacles, was it fear that kept you in while you were there?
Absolutely.
Yeah, what they might do to you.
Yes.
Did you embrace their ideology, or was there some evolution on your part where you just said, I'm done, this is not who I am?
I never felt that it was who I was. But you feel like you're part of something bigger. And when the movement would make you feel important to get what it wanted out of you. And I just had never had, a sense of belonging. And it was good to feel like a sense of power and a sense of camaraderie. And also once you're in, you can't just walk away. It's a blood in, blood out lifestyle. I mean, you fight the people that you're the closest with on a regular basis.
I'm thinking about Daniel's experience in all of this, and I feel very lucky that I've gotten to know Daniel and his spouse Amanda and their fabulous kids as they've connected more deeply with the temple. But I'm thinking about this other Daniel from way back, who is intrigued by this neighbor and is fascinated. But what I'm also thinking about is just the openness that it takes, because there are people out there in the world who would say, I'm not going to get, within 10 feet of this guy. I read the story, but he sounds like there's something wrong. I mean, what kind of person could get involved in such a thing? Forgive me, John. I'm just kind of imagining how someone might approach that and say, I don't want to have that conversation. And, there's a lot of talk these days about cancel culture. And you'd say, wow, this guy was a neo-Nazi. I don't care what the story was. He's a Jew who ended up in this thing. I want nothing to do with him. And yet your curiosity, not just as a filmmaker, but as a person, and your open-heartedness, as I've experienced you, led you to this story and this friendship. And I'm really glad that you did that. But the question then, Daniel, is how did you do that? How did you keep your heart open? How did you keep your mind open? And how might that help us in these days when we want to try to dialogue with people that we might disagree with? How were you able to do all those things?
It's an interesting question. I think I've spent a very limited amount of time, if any, thinking about that myself. But I think the first thing that comes to mind is there's always been an element, perhaps it's the way I never really fit into the school system, the way I learned. I wasn't necessarily ostracized or bullied as perhaps Kevin was. So I never got pushed as a kid into an alternative fringe or anything like that. But the system as a whole, it never really worked that well for me. And I was a bit of a rebel and always just felt like I have this life. I don't know what it is or where it came from, but I know that I'm here. And I know that others are also just here. And if I don't really know what's going on, why would anybody else really know what's going on? Once you step back far enough, we're all just on a pebble flying through space. And I think that's helped me look at things a little bit more unbiased, like a little bit more openly in terms of it's the guy. I don't really want to associate the stigma of what one could label him with, however heavy it might be. I want to find out how it happened, why, what, who, what was in it for him, what would cause anybody to do this. And then you find that when you start peeling back layers and you break through the assumptions, which are dangerous, and anybody who assumes anything is going to assume and not find out what the truth is behind it. I think once you start stepping through those initial barriers, you start discovering human beings and their journey and their perspective and their relationships and their experiences. And that's when things become interesting, and you realize that there's an entire world through each one of our eyes. And that is the sum of who you are, where you were put, what's around you, and the circumstances that lead you to where you are. And I think that the most important thing for humans is, who are we becoming, and are we looking forward? And I saw John being somebody who was completely obsessed with becoming better, becoming more, how can I use my past to do good now? And I think that that was very intriguing. So I can look past all these things that happened. And then when you look at the actual circumstances, you could make an argument, that, we can all pretend like you should have just left, but none of us were in that situation. And I think for a 16-year-old kid to be through what John was put through, even before they attempted killing, or actual successful killing, and then somehow his miraculous awakening and driving himself to the hospital, there's a scared Jewish kid who had a tough life and was dealt some bad hands. And I think we can all learn from that.
Daniel, it sounds almost like you're giving us an insight into what it takes to be a documentarian as a filmmaker. And it sounds like on some level, if there's a takeaway from this, it's that all of us have to be documentarians, which is to allow ourselves to enter into the mindsets of others to the extent that we can. And through that perspective, that sense of empathy and curiosity, we rediscover things about ourselves as much as we have come to understand the person. Is that, did I paraphrase that correctly?
It does. And I feel like there's an exercise that I enjoy also for self identification, understanding why you're doing the things you're doing, but it's called the 7 levels of why. And if you just say, I want to be rich, and you ask yourself why, and you write the answer down, and then you ask yourself, well, why to that answer? And then you take it back a notch and you write why to that answer. You start going deeper to the fundamentals of what's driving you at all. And you find out that the things that you want are not really the things that you want. They're the things that you think you want. And I think how you can translate that into being a documentarian, and I agree with you, Ron, everybody should look at something and wonder why, and then dig deeper and wonder why, instead of just saying, well, they say this, so that must be it. I don't like this, so I'm anti, or I don't believe this, or he should have. Ask yourself why, and then again, and then again, and then again, 7 times, and you will find something that you didn't even imagine you would find.
Thanks, Daniel. So John, you went through what must have been for a teenager the most difficult experience that anyone could imagine. And then you talk about the PTSD and the impact that it had on you. And then you made a decision on some level to go back to the belly of the beast. You went to meet Kevin in Eastern Europe. What compelled you to, and I'm not just talking about the decision to hop on the plane and go, but I'm saying psychologically for you, the tension that it must have evoked and the difficulty must have been powerful. What provoked you to do that?
Who else could we send?
Well, anybody, right? I mean, you could have said, I can't do this anymore. I can't take it. But you agreed to do it.
Part of Kevin reaching out to me was he said that he wanted to make amends for his past, and that was by going to these various concentration camps. And that is why I reached out to Daniel. And by saying, who could we send? Him being able to reach out to me as a former skinhead saying, you're someone that I can connect with to make this path. I knew that Kevin was trying to do his own form of tshuva. Kevin was trying to do his own form of repentance. So for me, it was something that, what am I going to turn my back on him? Which plays into what Daniel just said. You have to see each person for who they are. And I figured that if Kevin's willing to make a chance, that if it's 50-50, that it's real or not, that I have to give that 50%.
So you were the essential catalyst for his change. You really felt like you would make a difference in his life.
And Kevin's?
Yeah.
I felt like together with, if we film this, I got Kevin's permission in the beginning to have this filmed before I reached out to Daniel, that if we film this, that we could potentially touch thousands of lives. This is a story above. It was effectively a story of 2 people working through some very serious difficulties after many, many years of separation. And when we got on the plane, there was one person that was involved in the project that wouldn't go because they were afraid of the dangers that were possibly waiting for us in Prague. This was after a week of them being in my apartment in Israel with rockets landing all around us. And I'm the guy that goes outside filming them when you hear the alarms go off. And the filmmakers had to follow me because that was their job. And that was a little stressful for them, wasn't it, Daniel?
They quit, yes. And then so it was a skeleton crew. I was filming. I had the microphone. I had 2 people there who were courageous enough to support us through the journey. But yeah, it wasn't an easy film to make, because as this is something that we completely cut out of the film. And just real briefly, I want to be respectful of time, but one thing that you said earlier about the documentarian side of things, I think people get documentaries and journalism confused. And I almost did too. There were a lot of opportunities in this film to make it about the situation in the Palestinian-Israeli kind of, and you know, well, that whole thing, right? Because we were in the midst of a pretty intense barrage of missiles coming in, and we were really interrupted a lot in Israel with missiles coming in and military activities. So it would have been very easy to make this film. Actually, we even went to the Gaza border to film some of the launches and stuff. And I realized in the edit that, what am I doing? This is not a statement. This is a story about two men. Let's leave it at that. This is what the story is about, John and Kevin, not about political views, not about the current situation. It's something else. And I think that a lot of times people, you know, use these sorts of opportunities to push an agenda, but you don't want to tell anybody what to think. You want to open their minds to have a conversation. And I think that's what we did by doing this, understanding the hatred that gets perpetuated, how young minds get manipulated, what it can lead to, and let people talk about it afterwards. And I think the people who were not there for us when we were moving on to, I did find it very ironic that they were there in war times, but didn't have sort of the kahunas to come work with us in Prague and in Poland.
In case you didn't know, cojones, I think, is an Aramaic word. Yeah, it means courage. I wanted to ask Kevin a question, and really one of the things that I find so powerful about the film is, and you mentioned the word, John, in Hebrew, teshuvah, repentance, you know, real change. And I think about, you know, all the change in the film itself. So we get to see, you know, and hear your story of change, John, and the things that you went through in your life, and we get to hear that from Kevin as well. And again, it's so interesting for me right now to be thinking about this film post everything we've witnessed in the last, you know, couple of years. When I originally saw it, it was before pandemic. It was before some of the racial justice protests of the last summer, before January 6th, all of those things. So my question for you, Kevin, is, and John, you can chime in afterwards, is when we think about the word teshuvah in Hebrew, repentance, there's a point where, according to Jewish tradition, you know that you've changed because you find yourself in a similar situation and you behave differently this new time. You know, you find yourself in a situation where you could act out your hatred for the other, or you could laugh at that racist or anti-Semitic or sexist joke, or, you know, you fill in the blank, but now you're a different person and you don't do that. And I'm interested for you, Kevin, can you talk a little bit about the moment when you realized I'm not that guy anymore?
I never really felt like I was anything other than wanting. I didn't seek out to be a racist. It kind of found me. And it was easy and convenient after a while. I knew that I wasn't going to grow, and I was just going to be an idiot. I might as well just get a trailer and be happy. It seemed idiotic. It seemed backwards. It seemed slow moving. Everything about it, if you really look at it, there's, you know, it's one singular hateful message that really doesn't begin anywhere. I don't know. I just felt like I wanted to be an adult, and I wanted to live a life free of any institutional idea of any kind. and it was just, it was very freeing. I just picked up and moved across the country to begin a new life. And I didn't feel that was scary at all. I felt it was scarier staying around people.
Thank you. How about you, John? Was there a moment that stood out where you realized that you had truly changed and become a different person?
Probably when I was standing in front of crowds of hundreds or up to thousands of people. That's when I began to see that my life had taken a totally different switch. After they tried to kill me, I dedicated my life to trying to bring these guys down. And I've done everything I can to speak out against them in every forum that I have opportunity to speak in. So with these guys, for me, it was just, it became my life, if you will, my focus, trying to do what I can to educate and bring down what I can.
And just one last question, and then I'll go back to Rabbi Stern. And for you, Daniel, in this process, I mean, you've been part of a lot of different projects, but obviously this one is especially powerful and near and dear to you. How did it change you?
First of all, it took me to Auschwitz. I hadn't been. And it's one of those things that we like in the community to say, oh yeah, you should really go. You should really, like it's a vacation in Hawaii. No, you should really go, because you're not going to understand until you walk through Auschwitz-Birkenau what the Third Reich was really all about. You will not understand its completeness until you walk through that place. And I think just the ability to have an excuse to actually go there, because I think I would have made a million excuses not to go for the rest of my life. I mean, there were neo-Nazis barbecuing next door. You know, a lot of people don't know this. A lot of the properties around Auschwitz-Birkenau are owned by Nazis because it's sort of, you know, they get to wake up in the morning and enjoy, you know, their work. So it really, there's a lot of odd emotions going on when you walk through that place. So that's one of the biggest things. And then of course, secondly, just the ability to do something with a story that I knew about from my adolescence, and to tell John's story and to help Kevin through his path as well, who was very reluctant to be filmed initially, but I'm very grateful that he was open to that and allowed me to do this, because I do feel like these kinds of documentaries have long legs. They're slow in their growth initially. They don't go out and, you know, shatter blockbuster records. That's known. This is not, I didn't expect this to go viral or anything crazy, but this is exactly what it's doing. You know, it's a little bit at a time. It took us through a bunch of universities. We were speaking. You know, it's increasing the amount of John's ability to speak. It's putting these guys' a story out there for the right people to find, and it will stay out there permanently now, and hopefully keep making small changes. Like John says in the end of the film, it begins with you. And the more people we can touch, as you know, in Judaism, you know, you kill a person, you kill a world. Well, you change a person, you change a world. So that's the hope for this film. And I think that I'm just honored that I was able to be at the helm of it and guide this project.
John and Kevin, thanks, Daniel, by the way. And we are privileged to be able to benefit from your dedication, so thank you. John, Kevin, you clearly developed a profound relationship, whether it was before or during the filming of the documentary. What would you say that you give and get to and from each other? And then what's your dynamic? What do you offer each other in terms of the human beings that you are and what you are together?
Wow, I guess I hadn't really thought about that. Friendship is friendship. I don't look at it as what I'm taking from somebody. Kevin is just a phenomenal individual, and I'm extremely impressed with the courage that he put forward in being involved in this project and doing things like this. So from Kevin, every time I talk to him, I learn something. So for me, it's the friendship.
It's the brotherhood. I've known through the worst of times and the best of times. So you can't get rid of it now.
Thanks, Kevin. John, what do you give to Kevin as a friend, as a brother? What's your gift to him?
Friendship and ear, advice, whatever I can do to help. Anything that he needs is that I try and do what I can to assist him and to encourage him. So that I share the stories that if I've gone someplace, or like today, Yom HaShoah, this is not the only place that I'm appearing at today. So letting him know that he's coming along as well. So that what he agreed to do, albeit reluctantly, letting him know the impact that he's continually having, that whenever I'm speaking to a group, that I always let Kevin know, or we talk about Kevin, that everybody asks about how Kevin is. So I try and give Kevin the encouragement to know that the change that he made, he may not feel it, but it is happening.
And Kevin, what do you give to John as a friend, as a brother?
A reason to answer the phone a couple times a month.
Hopefully, sorry, you cut out so we can all hear it.
I give him a reason to answer the phone a couple times.
Here you go. Okay.
I hope I give him just the love I have to give him. I don't know. I never thought about it. I'm not trying to give too much, and I'm not trying to take too much. So.
Can I, as an observer, say what these guys give each other?
Please, yeah.
I've known John before this journey. I did not know Kevin, but I've come to know him, and there's a lot more interview and a lot more conversation that happened off camera that the rest of the world is never going to be privy to, but luckily I am. And it seems to me like what you're looking at here is the completion of two men's journey. They started this together, and they're summing it up together in a very profound way. And in a way, there's this mess that was in between. But I think through this, Kevin's really who started this. John's story has been out there, but it's been incomplete. And when Kevin reached out and asked to reunite, it just kind of came full circle. So I think what you have now is a completion of two men's message to the world and their personal journeys in maybe what they were looking for from the beginning, basically coming out of this as a result. So I hope that makes sense.
One of the really powerful things about the story and when we think about the very first news media stories about John's experience, and a lot of us do remember that, having heard about that and read about it in the paper and that kind of thing, and then you see the film, and that takes us back. What, Daniel, you filmed it 5 or 6 years ago now? Is that about right? Now we're in this moment right now. We're having this conversation, so we could kind of go back and say, Kevin, if you were trying to talk to your former self, what kinds of things might you say? What kinds of advice might you have? And that'd be an interesting conversation. But I'm also interested in kind of a dialogue with your future self, because, we change and we grow and we evolve, and then we're at this place, which is now. And sometimes it's hard to imagine, like, oh, okay, now, and where am I going to go next? Where am I going to be 5 years from now or 10 years from now? So I'll ask you to do something really challenging, for both Kevin and John, especially given all of the things you've been through and given the place we see ourselves in right now. John, you referenced some of the things you saw in America, looking, at January 6th and wondering, whoa, this place that used to be home for me, look at this now. And I know for many folks who live in America, sometimes we see things in Israel where, the sixth election in 4 years or whatever it was, when we hear about unrest in Israel that's internal, not just Israel-Palestinian conflicts, but internal infighting between Haredim and Chilonim, or Mizrahim and Ashkenazim, or whatever it is. Outside looking in, we wonder, how could we make this experience different in any of these places? So I'm just now going to make it personal. So for you, Kevin, for you, John, 10 years out, what do you see yourself doing in terms of moving the needle a little bit further, because you've already moved that needle. But how do you take us to the next place? Where do you see yourself being in terms of this conversation, this relationship?
Wherever Hashem decides, wherever the Almighty decides.
Do you have a sense of where you'd want that to be?
Sir?
Do you have a sense of what you would want that to look like beyond what God's will is for you?
To keep touching as many lives as possible. I think you choose this as like a career choice, sort of like you being, everyone that's involved with the clergy. You make a choice that you decide you want to start touching other lives. And this story has taken over my life, if you will, that it's now become, in a sense, my identity, that I'm the Jewish ex-Nazi who never wanted to be either. Well, not either, who never wanted to have the Nazi part attached to his name. And I apologize for me stuttering. It's a little early in the morning. Kevin?
I just want to keep trying to perceive myself as being an open individual. Other than that, I just hope life gets a little easier to understand.
Yeah.
So as we promised folks first of all, again, there's so many questions we could ask you. You gentlemen have just, you opened your souls to us, and we're so grateful for that. And I want to acknowledge members of the community who are listening by sharing some of their questions. So this first from a member of our listening audience. First of all, I'm just going to read right from their text. First of all, I want to say Bravo was an amazing movie. So Daniel, to you. In putting your story out in the world, have you encountered other Jews who were forced into hate groups as well?
Never.
So Kevin and John? No,
never.
So you're an anomaly, huh?
So I've been told.
I've met some who've left hate groups to become Jews. That I've heard of a couple of those. Yeah.
This I've definitely read about. Correct. There have places that I've traveled where I've heard stories of Jews that were affiliated with racist groups, but that was usually of their own choosing. Like in one shul in Canada, a mother approached me that her son actually went to the Charlottesville riot together with groups of neo-Nazis.
And Kevin, for you, sorry.
Just from a nice Jewish home, nice Jewish boy. Kevin?
So Kevin, are you still in fear that your former life will come knocking on your door? Do you believe they're still looking for you?
Not at all. I was no one important. I was of no.
They moved on, you moved on. Have there been any negative repercussions from the documentary?
Absolutely not. Okay. Absolutely not.
I will say that when we were making this, the process of communicating with some of the members, because we weren't sure where the movie was going yet, and there was an idea here that I did actually make contact with some of the people involved. Not the most, part of the reason that my working name is Daniel Brea and not my God-given name, which is, well, it's my mother's maiden name, but part of the reason was to create a little bit of a layer of separation there. But I think it's calmed down, but there were some really interesting, odd, questionable things said in some of those conversations, even just over the phone, like, hey, don't play with fire, you're going to get burned,
Well, and we've seen, so much in the last year or so, the way speech can then turn to action and behavior. And we know that, of course, going further back. And when we look back now, Yom HaShoah, look at the rise of Nazism, and we think about rhetoric, and well, it's just talk, it's not going to go anywhere. So I guess, Daniel, part of the lesson is, when someone says they want to harm you, when someone says they want to kill you, they take them seriously. And at the same time, we shouldn't live in fear. Rabbi Nachman of Bratslav said, the metaphor of the narrow bridge, but we can't freak out all the time and be afraid. So I guess, for all three of you, you had lots of real reasons to be afraid at times for your own lives, for the well-being of, people you care about. How have you managed to deal with those very real fears without just dismissing them as like, oh, that's silly, I shouldn't be scared or something like that? John, you know all too well that that kind of hatred, that kind of language can lead to bodily harm, lasting harm. How do you confront those fears bravely?
It's what you have to do. Or the way that I view it is that if something were to happen to me, worst case scenario, I become a martyr, which the story becomes even better known. Or if they just beat me up again, the story becomes more press for the story. So really everything they're doing is for the betterment of our cause. So I just try and keep that in the back of my mind as I go forward, that whatever happens is our good benefit. As you look at the ratings of the film, you can see that it's gone down some. Those are all 1 stars. Every 1 star you see is a white supremacist that's come to vote just against the film.
Correct.
So
no.
Yeah, I was hoping to just kind of do the don't hate the messenger thing. You have to take note of inaction being worse sometimes than, inaction, when you know that there's something that sort of needs to be said and done, and you're in a position to do it, it's very hard not to, have issues sleeping at night, knowing that there's something that you could and should be doing when it's something that's really that important to you. And then all this, you look at people like Dr. Martin Luther King and Nelson Mandela, and, you look at, people who have really put their voice out there and were not afraid to do so. And then you just start wondering again, kind of what is this whole thing all about anyways? And if we live in fear, then we're not living. So be the person that you want to be and that you should be, and take the blows, because you could also, knock on wood, but you could also just get hit by a car tomorrow morning and it could all be over. So why not try and do something that's a little bit above you and beyond you, to help move the needle in a positive direction, because there's enough.
It really sounds like, and this is by way of sort of ending our conversation, that again, what you both bring to us is both an acknowledgement of fear and the recognition that if that fear freezes one, then one doesn't make a difference either in the world and in one's own life. And even beyond that, you both, the three of you know that this documentary is not going to all of a sudden stop neo-Nazis from becoming neo-Nazis or change the world, but yet nonetheless, and I think, John, you said it most powerfully, who else is going to do it? If I don't do it, who else is going to do it? And so you acknowledge the fear and you recognize that it has to begin with you, even if it won't end with you, but it has to begin with you. What a wonderful Yom HaShoah message of, even in the midst of the pain that you've experienced and the tragedy of your stories, is also the turnaround that says we've turned this into something that is going to bring good to the world through our eyes and through our friendship and through our brotherhood and through our commitment. So thanks to all of you for making the time. John, for getting up early to be with us. We appreciate it. And Rabbi Yoshi, any last words?
Well, I know a lot of folks who joined us this evening have seen the film. Daniel, can you remind everybody who might not have seen the film yet how they can watch it and how they could share it with a friend so that other people could see this, because it's a really important story and it needs to be heard.
Yeah, thank you. For those of you who have an Amazon Prime membership, you can just search Escape from Room 18 on Amazon Prime. For those of you who don't, you can rent it, or you can watch it on Tubi for free with advertisements. Tubi, T-U-B-I, is a platform that is free for the user and get paid with ads. So that's that. And it's also on Google Play and Hoopla, which is the library system, and a couple other platforms. So I think if you just Google search Escape from Room 18, you'll find a solution that works for you. And we would certainly appreciate the reviews and the ratings on Amazon, as that helps the algorithm push it to more people who might like it.
Perfect. Happy to do our part. Thank you all.
Everybody.
Thank you all. It's been an honor.
Good morning and good evening.
Yeah.
Good night.
Good night.